What's up, everybody? Back in the familiar, friendly confines here of the brick fireplace backdrop. Um, Back from Chicago, first episode recording, since Chicago. We'll keep it short. You're hearing this either on a Monday afternoon, evening, or on a Tuesday morning. You name it. Thanks for sticking with us. No content on Friday. No drip show there. National was crazy. To kind of give you a rundown of National, guys, I'm gonna make sort of an announcement here. No, I wasn't signed by Fanatics, to a long-term deal, and no, I honestly didn't even add any sponsors while we were there. I was a little surprised. Did a bunch of videos, did stuff. I think everybody's kind of assumes that I have 500 sponsors already. But anybody who asked me to do anything, I did. But no, the announcement is this: bringing back a fan favorite. We're going to be doing the National Treasures series for 2023. Something that we've done after the National the last couple of years. And I look forward to it because while you guys get to listen to me and my take on the hobby and cards and you name it, you'll hear about my take on the National a million times over. I think it's more fun to bring you a set of diverse hobby participants who are going to tell you what their thoughts about the National were. And we're going to bring you from all walks of life. We're going to bring you, people who run businesses. We're going to give you people who are just collectors. We're going to have people who this is the first time doing it. People that have been there a ton of times. Folks who have been there as collectors but were first-time business people this time, and kind of give you a comparison view. What it's like when you're there as a consumer versus what it's like when you're there working and representing a business. So I have a bunch of great guests lined up, as often happens once these start going out there and you guys start sharing them. You start telling people about them. Iowa Dave goes out there and starts, posting about them on the, on his page, and Andy Savakinis. Yeah, you both just got mentioned. That's a big thank you for putting me on your stories and letting folks know that my content's out there. Anybody else who does it, I'll mention you guys. I'll repost you. I'll thank you. That's how other people find out about the content. They learn. But what winds up happening, and it's happened the last couple of times, is I get about 2 or 3 episodes into the 10, and people will message me asking if they can make the 10. But I've already got my 10 lined up and agreed to. So we expanded it. One year we expanded it to 30 folks. So if you're hearing this and you're interested in being on the National Treasures series, that you think you are a treasure to the hobby and that you can, tell me something about the National, some experience you had at the National that, that makes for a good story, good hobby content, reach out to me. Send me a message. We'll see whether or not it's something that we think we'll be able to fill up a whole episode. And those are going to start relatively soon. I've already started recording them. So, everybody's got to fit their schedule in and all that other fun stuff. But it's a great, great, great series. I love seeing the National through my own eyes, but I love seeing the National through the eyes of folks who, bring something different with them as they walk through the door, and they view it with a very different set of eyes than I do as well. For good or for bad, we get the whole honest take of it. It's one of my favorite things to do after the National. I've reached out to a bunch of folks, everybody from, collectors you've never heard of to, I reached out to Nat Turner today, and I'm hoping he responds back. He had some awesome stuff. Got to chat with him a minute there at the National. Love to hear, that dude was working. He was standing in front of the PSA booth, as was Scott Roskin over at Beckett. As was, look, it run the gamut, right? I saw all those guys. I saw, Dwyer from REA. I saw Grady from Heritage. I saw, Arena Club. Their COO, founder, and CFO, Jesse Glass, was handing beanbags to folks to play their cornhole game. People roll up their sleeves, they get dirty, they want to meet the folks, right? So, anyway, that's it. I had a blast there. I really did. I had a lot of fun. And we will spend some time getting my take on it. But one of the things that came out of it, and I hope you guys enjoy the title, The Psychology of the Slab, because I've kind of been wrestling with it myself recently. What goes into the slab itself? And it doesn't really matter which slab we're talking about, Beckett to PSA or SGC, CGC, Arena Club slab, tag slab, the psychology of the slab, right? What do I mean by that? Well, I'll start off with a story, okay? And the story will branch out to some experiences at the National and just an overall take. And I'm wondering whether or not, I'd love to see the comments on this. I'm wondering whether or not anybody thinks the same way I do. Anybody has had the same sort of internal push and pull about this. So let me give you an example. I collect some Ken Griffey Jr. cards, not the same ones that everybody collects, not the same PMGs and you name it. And it's funny because in that world, like my Griffey Ruby is a PSA 8, right? I'm not saying I need a Griffey Ruby and I need it to be a PSA 10, right? Because they're so limited that's a difficult thing. But the cards that I do collect that aren't as rare, they're rare in a high grade. I do collect Griffey PSA 10s of earlier 90s inserts that, because of the condition sensitivity of some of the cards, because of the way they were in packs, because people were just not hermetically sealing them in PSA slabs as soon as they came out of a pack, some of them have very few PSA 10s. And I am sort of a, like a snob. I want that, I want to have one of those. I want to have a run of them. And I found a card that I don't have in my collection. And there are single digits of this card in PSA 10, but I will tell you that there are thousands of this card. I own it raw. I'm sure it's only a couple of bucks raw. But because of the scarcity of the card in PSA 10, in a 10, it is a 4-figure card. And I found one that it was close to my price range. It's difficult to come up with what your price is for something like this because they just don't come up for sale that often, and you kind of almost have to grab them when they do. And I was close to pulling a trigger on it, and I looked at the card, and I looked at it's an old slab, very old, no lighthouse label, no hologram, no nothing, just a white label, which is fine. Doesn't necessarily mean anything bad. I have some 33 Gaudis that I purchased a long time ago, and we'll get into that in a second. That have old label slabs. Doesn't mean that they are bad grades, doesn't mean that there's anything wrong with them. It's just, it's an older slab. And anyway, I took a look at the back of this card, and there were some chipping, I'll call it, on the top edge of the card. And to me, immediately what I thought to myself was, if this card was sent into grading now, right? If I grabbed this card and I cracked it and I sent it in just as a raw card to PSA, I don't think it would be a 10. As a matter of fact, I'm pretty certain it wouldn't be, because the chipping on the top is pretty evident, because, the card stock is white. The card back is not white. So you have some white showing on the top of the card. One of the corners didn't look great either. You can see some white on it. Now, keep in mind, PSA 10 does not mean it's an unimprovable card. We can talk about that in a second too. PSA 10 being the top of their grading scale does not make it a perfect card. So I guess it's possible this is still a quote PSA 10. But after a review of it, I thought to myself, I don't know if I am comfortable paying such a significant markup for this card, because I don't really think it's a card that is worth it, right? I mean, for lack of a better way of saying it, right? But then I say to myself, there's only single digits of these, right? And I haven't seen, I've seen other ones, but for significantly more than this person wanted for theirs. But it's a card I look for. It's a card I know. It's a card I pulled out of packs as a kid. And yet it's not one that's going to come up again. And now knowing this, there's one less. You're taking 10 to 12% of the full population of me potentially getting a PSA 10 out of the equation, right? Like I can't, if I don't say yes to this one, I'm not buying the other one for thousands more. And I haven't seen any other of the single digits come up for sale. Like the psychology of the slab becomes this. Do I pay the money for that 10? Am I really paying to check off a box and get that 10 in my collection, even though in my heart of hearts, I don't believe that card inside the slab to be a 10? And I wrestled with it. I did. I wrestled with this for a while. I almost purchased the card. I'll tell you the conclusion is that I did not purchase the card, but obviously it's still on my mind. Obviously, it's something I'm still thinking about. Do I have non-buyer's remorse? Maybe. Because the thought process there of, all right, do I buy this because it's a card I need for my run? It's a card that I need for my collection. It's a card that would make me happy to own. But the flip side is, and we're getting into the psychology of it, would it really make me happy to own it when I am not really of the belief that it is a 10? Sure, it will have the slab that says that it's a 10. It will have the label that says that it's a 10, but it won't be a 10 in my brain. Anybody ever had this happen? I'd love to hear what you did. Did you buy it anyway? Because you knew that that little voice in your head was just going to beat you up every day and say, that's a missing spot. That card is not there. It's not in your collection. Your run is not complete because you don't have that one. And who knows when it's going to come up again. Just buy it. You know, if another one comes up again, you can replace it with that and then sell that one. Is that what you would do? I mean, maybe I should have done that. To me, though, a 9 of this card is less than $100. Yeah, that's the difference, right? And it got me thinking about the psychology of the slab. Why is a 9 a mint card? Let's use this card, right? This same card, if you put it in a 9, let's call it $100. But if it's got the 10, it's 4 figures. Is there that much of a difference? Is the manufactured scarcity so great? Now, keep in mind, some of these statements are sort of against my own interest here, right? Because, I mean, I have Joe Montana, PSA 10, right? That's a card that recently sold in the golden auction for $50,000. A PSA 9 is what? Single digit percent of that? 10% of it? 15%, maybe a real nice copy, Are there some 10s in slabs that don't really deserve the 10s? Are there some 9s that are nicer than the 10s? And let's take that as the psychology part. All right. Would you buy a really nice 9 instead of a really bad 10? And say, look at my 9, it's nicer than a 10. I had a Charizard PSA 9 that I thought was nicer than half the 10s I saw. But you know what? When I pulled the 9 out, you know what everybody said? Everybody said, oh, man, that's a nice one. How come it didn't 10? How come it's not a 10? How come it's, why isn't it a 10? Oh, it'd be so nice if that was a 10. And that plays into the psychology of the slab, right? Because showing someone a Charizard 9 is not the same thing as showing someone a Charizard 10. Maybe most people don't look that deep. Maybe, my Griffey card, people will see that it's a 10 and that I have a run of 10s, and they're not going to even pick up the card and look at the back. And with all the vaulting that's going on and all the, we buy cards and don't even really touch them, and it's just going to be transferred to somebody down the road. Is it something that I shouldn't care about? Is it something that I'm thinking too much about? And I should just get my card and rely that the label's a 10 and that's all people care about. The funny thing is, I think some people do care about the label, right? One of the interesting things that happened at the National was Rick Probstein showed up with, I think it was 31 PSA 10 Michael Jordan rookie cards. One of those was formerly mine. 30 of the other ones were formerly somebody else's. And you got 31 PSA 10s. And what he did was, didn't crack them, right? No cracking out. No one's going to crack out the PSA 10 Jordan. But took them to Beckett to see if any of them would cross over to a Beckett 10. Now, let's take a step for a second and think, what does that mean, right? What it means is he's hoping, or he believes, that at least a few of these cards, or at least one of these cards, should be considered better than a PSA 10. That it is a Beckett 10, a pristine card, which then would carry some premium over the PSA 10. Now, Beckett did not cross any of them. He picked them up, and all 31 remain PSA 10s. Does that mean that a Beckett 10 of cards should now carry an increased premium? Maybe. Think of how hard it is if now 10% of the population does not qualify. 10% of the PSA 10s, were not going to be Beckett 10s. Why did he cross it over? What's the psychology there? Why did he try to cross it over? What's the psychology there? I did it myself, right? So this fun national story. I brought 2 cards that are Beckett pristine gold 10s, and I attempted to have the graders review them and see whether or not they would qualify for a black label. I will give Beckett credit. They provided a slip with a little explanation, a little pen, a little circle, little whatever it is of what they thought on the card was the 195, the one thing that prevented the card from becoming a quad 10 black label. And at least there you have, an answer. But the difference between a black label on some of these cards, which would be a $100,000 card, versus a gold label, which makes it a $40,000 card, versus a PSA 10, which makes this particular card a $6,000 card. A Beckett 9.5 with, 2 9.5s and, 2 10s, right? That's a $4,000 card. It's just amazing what goes into it, right? At least for me, getting the explanation to kind of, show what was, deficient about the card was helpful. It kind of explained it to me, but I would almost venture to say that there are probably cards out there in 9.5, 9.5 with 2 10s that are, just as nice as a pristine 10. Just as nice. And I'm sure there are folks who have, quote unquote, bumped a 9.5, 9.5, 10, 10 up to a pristine 10. I'm sure it's happened on many, many cards. What does that mean, right? What's the bump? The bump means that there's wiggle room in the system, right? There's wiggle room. It means that a 9.5 today might be a 10 tomorrow with somebody else looking at it. They're borderline. And think of the amount of money that the difference between those two are. I know that people brought cards to the show in Chicago and got their grades bumped. I watched it. I saw what happened. I saw people sending in gold labels and getting black labels out on the same card. And I got to tell you, the psychology of it, I got to sit down and lay down on a couch maybe and talk to somebody. The psychology of that, it kind of scared me a little bit, right? Because a lot of my cards, the reason why they are valued the way they are is because of this graded scarcity, this manufactured scarcity, this, PSA 10 or Beckett Gold 10. And if there is this wiggle room in grading, this fallibility, this ability to bump, this ability to try to cross, and maybe Rick crosses those 31 another time and one of them does get a gold label. Who knows? You never know what's going to happen that day, right? But if there is that sort of human element to it, and this is not a tag advertisement, but if there is this human element to it, Does that scare you about the value you have in cards, that at least in part those cards value is because of manufactured scarcity? The difference between a really nice Joe Montana 9 rookie and a Joe Montana 10, right? It really is a something to think about. And I want to say it scared me a little bit. This is, part of the base card craziness. Oh, but it's a base card 10. All right, but it's still not rare. It's still not scarce. And it gets me back to the Griffey stuff. And what's funny is I sometimes give a hard time to like the PMG collectors and the, Ruby collectors in the late 90s and say, the stuff that I collected is just as cool, if not cooler. I think PMGs are ugly, but Scoring King Jordan is that's the stuff right there. All right, well, think about it. I paid a lot of money for a Scoring Kings 10. That's not a rare card, right? In 9, it's significantly less money. 8, even less money. It's the same card. Anyway, it's just one of those things I was thinking about. I call it the psychology of the slab. It's sort of nuts to think about it. I don't know how it will impact my collecting going forward. I mean, I don't have a Michael Jordan 10 anymore. It was cool owning a Michael Jordan PSA 10, being one of the 300 and something people. Andrew and I used to talk about it all the time, that it's sort of like less about the card and more about the club membership. I'm one of the few that owns one. And, there can't be 300 people in that club because Rick owns 31 himself. And I'm sure other people own multiples as well. So you find yourself in, sort of this Jordan 10 owner club, right? Which is, it's fun. But the psychology here is, why not find one in a Beckett slab that's got 295s and 210s or 395s and a 10, and it looks just as nice, if not nicer, than some of the cards that are sitting in PSA 10 slabs. And you pay less. It's going to be significantly less. So that's where my brain is. Like, should I sell my Joe Montana 10 and buy a Joe Montana 9? But here's the fun part of the psychology of the slab. Why do we buy these cards? And why do we own them? Is part of the hobby we're in sort of the showing off? Is that part of it? Getting on Instagram and showing the cards off? Laying those cool cards down on a table and saying, look what I got, and people saying ooh and ah. And is the ooh and ah the same for the Joe Montana 9 as it is for the 10? For the Michael Jordan BGS 9.5 as it is for a Michael Jordan 10? The answer is clearly it's not. Getting into the why it's not, I can't answer about, folks that are out there. I can answer myself. It is that scarcity, manufactured or not. I walked across a table where someone had the Excalibur 2014 set, the Kaboom set. And he had a bunch of different grades and was trying to sell the set complete. And he had the LeBron prominently displayed, and his LeBron was an 8. And I said, do you want to upgrade the set? And he's like, what do you mean? And where his LeBron was on the showcase, I laid down my LeBron, which was a PSA 10 and the only one that's there. And of course, everybody around the showcase like, oh my God, look at that card. Can I hold it? Can I take a picture? And that's not even the most expensive card in the world. But I'm quite certain that his 8 was very nice and a very comparable card to the 10, but significantly less costly. The card looks the same. It's still the same Kaboom. Still the same artwork. But what's the value of me being able to hold up mine and say it's the only one that there is? I guess that's something everybody has to decide for themselves. Maybe you'll let me know what that value is to you in the comments. I hope you enjoyed this, guys, because it's something that my brain has been twisted. As Andrew liked to say, you twisted my brain into a pretzel. It's something my brain has been, dealing with for, a bit now. And maybe it's regrets of not buying that Griffey card that did pop up for a reasonable price that I did not pull the trigger on. Maybe it's stuck in my brain and I'm just going to beat myself up. And I should have paid the money just to not have this, this tugging at my brain. But is this something you guys deal with yourself? do you buy that 10 because that's just what you collect? Do you buy a 10 that you know is probably not a 10? Do you just kind of look the other way? You hold your nose and say, all right, I got my 10. I can check the box and I move on and forget that it had some issues maybe on the back of the card. If you do that, you don't really have to tell stories that you bought the 9, but it's the nicest 9 out there. You just lay it down on the table and here's a 10. It's fun stuff to think about. Again, guys, I hope you enjoyed this. We'll talk to you soon. Stay tuned for the National Treasures 2023 series, where we're going to hear a whole bunch of stories of different people and how they experienced the National in Chicago. Take care, everybody.